My family abandoned me because my sister blames me for her divorce. Years later, I get an email out of nowhere with proof that reveals the truth, so I ruined her life with it. Nearly 7 years ago, my family cut me out of their lives and kicked me out of the house. I was 22 years old at the time, barely able to support myself, and completely unprepared for what happened, both financially and mentally. The cause of it all was my sister, Hannah, who's now 37. She and I never got along due to our significant age gap. When she was 27, she married Pete, her boyfriend of 3 years. 3 years into the marriage, they divorced after she accused Pete of having an affair with one of my friends. I had been living with my parents after college, trying to save money before moving out, and they were fine with this arrangement until Hannah announced her divorce. One day, she came home hysterical, claiming she'd filed for divorce because Pete had been cheating on her for 6 months. She blamed me, saying I was at fault for introducing my friend Emily to Pete. Emily, 28, was working on gaining weight, and Pete, a certified dietitian, had agreed to help her. I was the one who introduced them, and apparently Emily was the one Pete had been cheating with. I was shocked because although Emily and I weren't close, I knew she was a good person who would never be involved with a married man, and cheating was out of character for Pete, who was head over heels for Hannah. Despite my doubts, my parents instantly believed Hannah without question, even though she had no proof of Pete's infidelity. I understand they would side with their daughter over their son-in-law, but what I couldn't grasp was why they kicked me out simply because Hannah said so. She threw a tantrum, accused me of ruining her marriage, and convinced my parents to throw me out. I was devastated, but my parents refused to listen and told me to leave or be forcibly removed. In one day, I lost my family and my home. I was left sobbing on the sidewalk with all my belongings, unsure of where to go. I eventually pulled myself together and stayed at a friend's house that night. I tried reaching out to my parents repeatedly, but they wouldn't budge, convinced I was responsible for the divorce. My friend kindly let me stay until I found a place of my own, but my parents had already made up their minds that I was in the wrong. My mom and dad had actually told me they were disgusted by what I'd done before kicking me out, which didn't even make sense because I wasn't the one Pete had cheated with. They'd blocked my number, so I couldn't contact them at all, and when I tried to visit, my mom threatened to call the cops if I didn't leave. That's when I realized they were serious and actually blamed me for whatever happened. I shouldn't have been surprised since my sister had always been the favorite child. My parents hadn't planned for a second child, so I was always sidelined. While I didn't care much growing up, I didn't realize it would lead to something so significant. Reflecting on it now, I guess I should have seen it coming. But honestly, I don't think anyone in my position could have anticipated this. I even tried to figure things out on my own for the next few weeks since Hannah and my parents had cut me off completely. I couldn't reach Pete either because he blocked me too, which didn't make sense. I couldn't find him because both Hannah and Pete had left their house and moved in with their respective parents. With no way to contact anyone involved, I turned to my last resort to uncover the truth. Emily. Although Emily and I weren't close, I had to do what I needed to. I asked to meet her and explain the situation. I inquired if what Hannah said about the affair was true, and she denied it vehemently. I believed her. Emily claimed she'd only met Pete a few times in a professional capacity, with nothing romantic going on between them. She had no idea why Hannah would make such awful claims about her. Emily even showed me pictures of her steady boyfriend, with plans to marry in a few months. What she told me was far more convincing than Hannah's accusations. I had no proof, but I was certain Hannah had lied about the real reason for the divorce. Since I had no proof, I couldn't go back to my family, and I certainly couldn't return without it. Back then, I was desperate to reconnect with them because I missed them deeply despite what they'd done. Over time, though, I managed to move on and build a new life. I found an apartment and threw myself into my job, which became my distraction and way of coping with the pain. I threw myself into work to avoid sinking into depression, as I had no other option. Although it hurt a lot, I knew I had to keep going, with or without my family's support. Years went by, and now my life is much better. I've moved from my tiny apartment to a larger one and recently got engaged to my girlfriend of 2 years. A week ago, we announced our engagement on social media, and that post turned out to be a game changer. Just a few days later, I received an email out of nowhere, explaining the entire story of Hannah's divorce and providing all the answers I needed, along with proof. My fiancée, Lisa, 30, usually only posted on Instagram, but the engagement photo also appeared on her Facebook feed, where it reached a broader audience. Pete, my ex-brother-in-law, saw the post. He had met Liza at a seminar years ago and added her on Facebook. It's a small world, and for once, I was grateful for it. Pete reached out to me a few days after the post, but instead of contacting me through social media, he sent an anonymous email. He explained later that he did this to avoid feeling awkward about reaching out, given the time that had passed since his divorce. He had initially blocked me, so he felt uncomfortable reconnecting about something so old. The email contained the full story and proof of what had happened 7 years ago. To my shock, it revealed that my sister had been the one cheating on Pete, not the other way around as she had claimed. Even more surprising, she had been cheating with a friend of mine, Frank, 28, who worked as a cashier near Hannah's house. I would never have connected the dots myself, as I had never seen them together, but they had managed to keep their affair well hidden from me. Hannah had accused me of ruining her marriage by introducing Frank and mentioning he needed her help because he was an aspiring singer. Hannah was a talented singer herself, so when Frank asked for her help, she agreed, and before they knew it, they'd fallen in love. She even claimed I was in on it and had helped them keep their affair hidden for so long. This was an outright lie. I had no idea anything was going on between Frank and Hannah. Pete was furious when he found out, and in his anger, he blocked my entire family. He admits now that blocking us was impulsive and unwise, but at the time, he was too angry to think clearly. He told me all this in person later because his initial email was meant to be anonymous and impersonal, avoiding any trace back to him. The email came with screenshots of messages between Hannah and Frank, full of love confessions, plans for secret meetups, and bragging about how easy it was to deceive Pete. Hannah had even signed off with her middle name, something not many people knew, leaving no doubt about her identity. I had her caught red-handed. After combing through Liza's Facebook friends, my gut told me Pete was the one who'd sent the email. Once I found him on her list, I reached out and we met up a few days ago. He told me he'd learned about what Hannah had told our family when he ran into Emily a couple of years ago. She'd asked him about the divorce, and that's when Pete discovered the lies Hannah had been spreading about me. I regretted telling Emily to keep my side of the story a secret back then because if I hadn't, she might have told Pete earlier, and I could have proven my innocence years ago. Pete admitted that he had wanted to reach out to me but felt too awkward to do so. If only he hadn't been so easily embarrassed, my life could have been very different. Still, I forgave him, knowing I needed his help to take down my sister. Pete was more than willing to join in, given how Hannah had wronged us both. Hannah had lied to our parents to secure their financial support during her divorce, even throwing me under the bus to protect her own interests. She knew one conversation between Emily and me would reveal the truth, so she kept up the charade. It was hard to comprehend how someone, especially a family member, could be so selfish. Hannah never bothered to correct her lies, and my parents believed every word. She knew that if the truth came out, that she was the one cheating, she would be in big trouble, so she hid it at all costs. But now, the truth was finally out, and I intended to use it to ruin her life, just as she had ruined mine all those years ago. I wasn't sure if my family still lived in the same house since I hadn't seen them in 7 years, but luckily, they hadn't moved. I confirmed this with an old neighbor before showing up and found out that Hannah was still living with them too. This didn't surprise me. Hannah had always been lazy and avoided any work, so living with our parents and making them do all the chores suited her perfectly. 2 days ago, Pete and I decided to show up unannounced at their house. My mom opened the door, and before she could even process what was happening, we barged in. My dad and Hannah were in the living room, and it felt like a twisted family reunion. Though their expressions quickly soured the moment we entered. My dad immediately started threatening us, saying he'd call the cops if we didn't leave, but I shot back, telling him he could do whatever he wanted, but only after reading the documents we had. My parents looked confused, but Hannah seemed like she was going to throw up and tried to escape to her room. It wouldn't have helped her, though. Pete pulled out the divorce documents and the emails between Hannah and Frank while I explained the real story. Pete also mentioned how Hannah had to give up our family heirloom, my grandmother's diamond ring, in the divorce settlement because she couldn't afford to pay him. She's just a high school teacher, so she sold the ring instead. My parents were horrified by what we were telling them, and hearing about the heirloom was just the final blow. We watched the drama unfold as my dad demanded an explanation from Hannah. But when she still tried to lie despite all the evidence, my dad kicked her out immediately. He packed her bags himself and handed them over before ordering all of us out of the house. I didn't need to be told twice and left with Pete while Hannah begged and pleaded with my parents to let her stay, just like I had done years ago. It was karma in action, and I couldn't have been happier. It's been a couple of days since then, and earlier today, Hannah showed up at my place, demanding that I fix things with our parents. I have no idea how she found me, but I told her I didn't owe her anything anymore. She ruined my life once, so I returned the favor, and now we were even. Apparently, she had no pride left because she started sobbing, accusing me of being a monster. I didn't care about her drama and shut the door on her while she kept crying. I put on my headphones and listened to music while Lisa, my fiancée, worked in her study so we wouldn't be disturbed. Eventually, Hannah left, but not before writing on my door with a marker, calling me a vengeful monster. Frankly, I don't see anything wrong with what I did and don't feel the least bit sorry. Hannah thinks I'm the villain, but I just did to her what she did to me years ago. Except I told the truth while she lied and threw me under the bus. So, what do you guys think? AETA for ruining my sister's life and getting her kicked out 7 years after she accused me of causing her divorce? It's been a week since Hannah got kicked out and she's still bothering me nonstop. Today alone, she called me 14 times before I finally had to threaten her with calling the cops to make her stop. I have no idea how she managed to get my phone number and address, but that's the least of my concerns right now. Hannah keeps trying to guilt-trip me into feeling sorry for her, acting like her teacher's salary isn't enough to survive on. I doubt that's true. I think she's just upset about having to fend for herself, paying rent, utilities, and groceries now that our parents have kicked her out. I've blocked her number several times, but she keeps finding ways to call, probably by getting her friends to conference her in, so blocking her has been useless. As for my parents, they're just as bad, if not worse, than Hannah. They found my engagement post on Facebook, and now they suddenly want to be part of my life again, even expressing interest in attending my wedding. They haven't apologized, yet they somehow expect me to invite them to what is supposed to be one of the most important days of my life. I don't understand where they get the audacity, but I'm not responding to any of their messages. Liza and I have been having a good laugh reading their texts because it's absurd that they think they can just waltz back into my life like nothing happened. Update: Hannah showed up at my house again, even after I threatened to report her for harassment yesterday. I was about to leave for work when she threw herself across the hood of my car, refusing to move until I talked to her. It was exhausting, so I ended up actually calling the police. They took her away while she screamed, cried, and tried her best to make me look like the villain, but no one was buying her act. It took some time to press charges, but once it was done, I headed to work, determined not to let her antics ruin my day. I figured my parents would bail her out, and I was right. After getting her out, they sent me a long text, whining about how I was being too harsh on them for a so-called honest mistake they made nearly a decade ago. It was honestly laughable. Nothing my sister or parents put me through was honest or a mistake. They knew exactly what they were doing and how cruel it was, yet they still threw me out with no regard for where I would go. Now that the tables have turned, they can deal with the consequences. I see no reason to be forgiving or kind at this point. I texted my parents back, letting them know they lost any right to tell me what I could and couldn't do years ago, so they should stop fooling themselves. I haven't blocked them yet since I haven't had the chance to go through all my messages, but I will soon. Hopefully, I'll be rid of this entire family for good. Update: I just got home from work and checked my socials, only to see another long message from my parents. Liza and I read it together, and honestly, it was the funniest thing I've ever seen. They don't even realize that nothing they say or do affects me anymore. I'm just amused by how delusional and pathetic they are. They still think we're family and mention that they've taken Hannah back in, deciding both their kids deserve a second chance, as if I'd done anything wrong in the first place. They also invited Liza and me over for dinner to sort out our differences before the wedding, assuming I'd even want them there. We laughed about their ridiculous message, and I replied, letting them know I had zero interest in anything they were inviting us to, and that I was perfectly fine staying away from them like I have for the past 7 years. They'd shown me I was better off without them, and for that, I'd always be grateful. I didn't need them anymore, nor did I want their so-called forgiveness. They could go on playing happy family with Hannah like they always have. With that final text, I blocked them once and for all. I don't even want the laughs anymore. I'm done, and I'm out. I'm sure they'll try to find another way to reach me eventually, but too bad for them. I'm not entertaining it anymore. Liza is the only family I need now, and I'm happy with just her. My parents and Hannah have always been too self-centered to see beyond themselves, and I doubt that will ever change. The next time they try to contact me, they'll be dealing with my lawyer. That's a promise.